everyone, and welcome to another NIDA in Conversation. I'm Tasnim Hossain, a playwright and director, and I've worked most recently with NIDA as one of the co-directors on the third year mid-year production, Eat Me. I'm joining you today from very chilly but beautiful Ngunnawal country, and I just want to take this moment to acknowledge any First Nations people who may be in the audience today and tuning in, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and it's a privilege for all of us to be able to share stories across this continent. It's my great pleasure today to be speaking with Natalie Rose, an exceptional theatre maker and arts leader who's been working in the industry and making theatre in the contemporary art space for more than 20 years here in Australia. Hi Nat, thanks for joining us.
Hey Tasnim, thank you for having me. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm on Wangal and Gadigal land of the Eora Nation.
So Nat Rose, along with Zoe Coombsma and Mish Grigor, is 1/3 of the performance collective Post. She's also creative director at Shopfront Arts Co-op, which is where I met her originally. And her work has been seen nationally and internationally at Sydney Festival, Belvoir, Sydney Theatre Company, Malthouse Theatre, Cambridge Junction in the UK, and at the Sydney Opera House, among others. She has toured to Santiago, Chile, West Kowloon Cultural Precinct Authority in Hong Kong, with Post's Oedipus Schmoedipus, and in 2020 it was to be showcased at Arts Centre Melbourne as part of AsiaTOPA, but as everyone knows, 2020 went pear-shaped. Post Ich Nibber Dibber was remounted at Sydney Opera House in 2017 as part of the Sydney Festival, which is where I saw it, and it was great, and at Malthouse Theatre. So Nat has facilitated workshops for the past 21 years for young and emerging artists with and without disability. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Theatre Making from the University of Western Sydney, and from Nepean, which sadly no longer exists. And has previously trained at PACT Centre for Emerging Artists and Urban Theatre Projects. And most recently, she directed Tiny Universe for Shopfront, which was on at PACT and is currently in rehearsals. Is that right? For The Lies We Told, which is a co-production with ATY.
Yeah, I am.
So Nat, how have you been keeping?
Good. I've been postponing a lot of shows and now we're going to rehearsals in Zoom.
Ah, yes. The dreaded Zoom rehearsal.
Yes. Yeah, I'm fine though. I think we're kind of, just seems like last year again.
Yeah, I mean, and then, you know, there's all of the cancellations that have kind of had to happen, like, you know, with one of Shopfront's shows. Actually, like with a lot of companies at the moment, Shopfront's had to kind of reschedule and postponed a lot of things. And there are some really exciting things that we're missing out on at the moment, including, a show that was meant to be on last year, meant to be on this year, now being pushed back. Also a drag show with very young, emerging drag queens, which is very exciting and I'm a bit gutted to miss. And I want to ask, is there anything that you've kind of found over the last 18 months that actually as an industry we've done well, or that we've learned from, or anything useful that's come out of the last kind of 18 months of uncertainty?
I think it's been pretty amazing how quickly we've adapted to it and still tried to offer, I mean, specifically for me, thinking of young people who did still need an outlet for like mental health and well-being, and to be able to get them online and still have a community that they're used to seeing weekly and things. I think we've been really great at. And I think banding together as like a wider community of the art sector. There's been a lot of support and a lot of sharing of knowledge and conversation, which I think has been really, really lovely to see.
Yeah, absolutely. It does kind of feel like, you know, it doesn't feel so much as separate companies or individual artists. It feels like a sector.
Yes.
And I guess the interrelations and the connections, I guess, between us seem really clear.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not in the retail sector, but they might all be banding together in the same way. Who knows? But yeah, like it doesn't feel competitive or anything. It just feels like, we're one, which is lovely. Yeah.
Speaking of one, when I kind of think about your work, I think a lot of your work with Post, and the fact that you make it with two other theatre makers who you've known for a very long time, and you each have very different theatre practices. I just find that so fascinating. So how did you, Zoe and Mish, meet? And what was it about the three of you that kind of felt like that was going to be a good creative partnership? And did you know at the time that you'd continue to make theatre together for almost decades? Is that something that you knew early on, or something that you realized as time went on? And also, if you could maybe talk a little bit about what your work is like with Post.
There's so many questions.
It was all of the things I want to know, and I want to know everything.
All right. So we met at PACT's Centre for Emerging Artists. They had an ensemble program called Impact. Mish and I actually both went to the same uni, but we were not in the same year. But we all went to PACT. We were all a part of the Impact ensemble. And it was pretty much, which was an ensemble that ran over a year. And you got to work with professional artists to create a show and train in voice and movement and theatre devising. And it was literally one day really early on that we were starting to devise this full-length work. And they said, you and you three go and make a scene. And we were in, the workshops used to be held in Erskineville Public School. And us three got sent upstairs, and the room was a kitchen for us to devise this scene in. And we got in there, and there was a dishwasher, and Mish is very tall. So we put Mish in the dishwasher because we thought that would be funny if a tall person comes out of a dishwasher. And then in the scene, she came out of the dishwasher, and we just found it so hilarious that we were like, this is meant to be. And I think what really drew us together was that we take being silly very seriously.
Excellent.
And yeah, and we just thought, yeah, we should make work together. So we did that ensemble program, which went for a year. And then the next year is when we first made our first sort of short work together. And then from there, I think because we just get along and genuinely really love each other and find each other really funny, that we were like, well, we'll just keep doing this. And then it kind of just went from show to show to show to show. And Mish and I both grew up in Western Sydney, and Zoe grew up in rural New South Wales. And I think we always wanted to make work that could connect to a theatre going audience, but also work that our mums could understand who don't go to theatre. And we wanted to talk about things that we had an opinion on, but try and do it in a funny way. Yeah.
I'm just shocked that anyone kind of put the three of you in a kitchen or thought that was a good idea. But yeah, they're not going to go wild.
There wasn't many spaces, Tasnim. There was like 20 of us in the ensemble program. So it's just like, you go to this little nook, you go here, and we got that kitchen, which was, thank God we got it.
Amazing.
Right?
Look, necessity is the mother of invention, as they say.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what are some of the kinds of things you learnt kind of making theatre in this way with this collective that you've kind of grown with as an artist?
What have I learnt? Wow.
Is there anything, I guess, about like practice, about your own practice, or just generally the kinds of work that you like to make or the ways you like to collaborate or work?
I think
a big part.
I genuinely just love collaborating. And with Zoe and Mish now, it's and obviously as years went on, it just became such an easy, natural thing to do, where we would just sit down and improvise for hours and hours and hours and record ourselves doing that. And like, we just know how that works. And I think whenever we get into a room together again, we just slip straight back into it. And what I love so much about collaboration is that it's sort of, whatever you create is bigger than the sum of the parts of the people involved. And each collaboration just creates such a different, unique outcome. And of course, there's some like terrible collaborations that you're like, I'll never work with that person again. But like, yeah, some are just so beautiful and so organic. And I think what have I learned? That each process is just so incredibly different. like even each process with post is so incredibly different of where you'll end up. And when, like, I always think of devising work that you sort of enter this tunnel, and then for a while in that tunnel, it's such a terrible place because you're like, I don't know what this work is. Like, I have no idea. And then there's some point in the tunnel where like there's a light, but you just don't know when in the process that's going to happen.
Yeah,
so you just kind of have to trust that you'll get out of the tunnel. And some tunnels you're in for way too long. It's just so terrible.
It's always stressful when they're funded tunnels as well. You're like, oh no, someone's funding this and we are not close.
Completely funded tunnels with like an outcome. Yeah, the worst tunnels.
I want to ask, do you ever start with like a starting point? Do you like come together with like, this is what we're working on? Or is it just like, we want to make something and then we get together and then kind of go from there? And this would be for post and generally kind of theatre making practices for you.
I think there's always a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
But the starting point and what the final outcome is can be very, very different. Like, and the starting point can also be something really quite simple. Like one work we made back in, I think it was 2018, shamelessly glitzy work. Like we had this idea of politicians, magicians, and ravers. Like that's a beginning, but where it goes from there, you have no idea. And then I suppose there's works that have a bit more, the starting point had, you know, is a bit more known, like Oedipus Schmoedipus. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Or working with young people, you may have the beginnings of the idea, but it's not until you get in the room with those specific people that you can actually understand or see what that collaboration is going to do with that starting point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It does seem like a very kind of organic process.
Yeah.
That, you know, doesn't have rules and that kind of you would adapt to suit whichever group you're working with.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, so you trained at Nepean, rest in peace, and then went on to work with PACT and with urban theatre projects. And how important, I guess, was that for you in terms of your career and kind of, I guess, your taste in what you like, but also in your processes in how you work? And I guess, what are your thoughts on access for training and opportunities for emerging artists now?
It's not great now. Training at Nepean was like amazing, and it was such a great course. And I think one of the things I enjoyed or got the most out of it was that we had each semester practical projects, and they were where you would intern on a production of another company's. So that's how I first got to work with urban theatre projects. So they were making a show called Mechanics, and a bunch of us from Nepean went along as theatre makers. And then that project went over a 2-year span. But you got to, really sort of see how professional artists would create a work. And I think devised theatre, when I first started uni, was like what? I can do anything I want. But the more I got to see how people work together and how you could create your own work, the more inspired I became to want to continue doing that. And so that course was, RIP, as you said. And then going to PACT and urban theatre projects, just to be exposed to so many different like established artists and get to do so many masterclasses in things that you may never use again. But just to get to experience different artists in a room, I think was so enjoyable. And then also just getting to like create work, but like fail, like be able to fail and be able to test ideas and think something's really good and do it. And then look back in 2 years and go like, oh my God, I did a performance with tarot cards because I was really into them.
And this sounds amazing, and I'm sad there's no footage.
And people let me do that. I don't know why they let me do it, but I'm so happy they did, because like just to get to test ideas in like a free, supportive space, to understand your practice and the work you want to make and why you want to make work, because it's not like, I don't think you can be in this industry for like the validation. or the money. Like, you have to be in it because you genuinely love it and you genuinely want to say something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I think as well, from Pact and urban theatre projects, like the people that I trained with, like some of them are still my best friends and have created like such a sort of little community within this bigger community of the arts sector, that you always know you've got those people there, and to support each other and to bring in as collaborators, or just to bounce ideas off in like an informal way. Like, I think it was beneficial in so many ways. And I don't feel like anything was like handed to us on a silver platter, because there was more opportunities. But I do wonder how artists can do that now when it's so competitive to get into things. If you can't fail, like, how do you build an artistic practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is something really interesting about, yeah, this idea of failure, because it feels like those spaces where you can do that are kind of more and more limited. You know, if we're taking something to an independent venue, there are venue costs. You need to get people, you need to sell tickets, you need to get people in. And sometimes, like, you know, we were talking about that funded tunnel, but sometimes things that are funded, like, you know, I made a lot of work in kind of fringe festivals where very small audiences saw the work that I made. And sometimes there were moments that were great, but there was a lot that was terrible.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really important for a development of an artist.
Completely. I think it was also like, you know, like performance space used to have short works nights where we got to perform at like quite a bit, like just as emerging artists, like, here's a seed of an idea, let's test it out in this amazing community with like people watching us who I still like am honored if they watch anything I create. And then even like friends who had warehouses, and you could just like put on a short works night and invite like 100 people. Everything just seemed so much, I don't know, like easier to do. Like there were less rules around a lot of it. Or maybe
doing shows in a parking lot or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I hear those stories and I'm like, damn, I wish I saw some of those shows at the genesis of all of these artists who are now, you know, making work kind of that's quite, I think, structured and main stage and respectable. And like the disreputable stuff is the stuff that I feel like would be really fun to have seen. I mean, so in terms of like accessing training opportunities now, is that something, well, I want to talk about your work with Shopfront. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do there and a little bit about Shopfront generally as well?
Yeah. So Shopfront's located in South Sydney, and it's a youth arts facility with programs for young people from aged 8 to 26, though I am lax on the 26 because I don't think
it takes a long time to build an artistic career.
Completely. You can't say you've emerged when you turn 27. Like suddenly you've just, there we go. No. And we have a suite of programs for young people and emerging artists, ranging from sort of weekly workshops in schools, and then also a whole suite of an emerging artist programs as well. And I think, like, I love all of those opportunities for the younger members of Shopfront to sort of have this place. For a lot of young people, it's their second home. It's the place where they fit in, where they can just be themselves. For young people who don't necessarily feel like they can fit in at school or somewhere else. And then for emerging artists, really, I've just tried to offer everything I possibly can give them. And in some ways, I suppose, replicate a lot of the things that a lot of the opportunities I was given early on. And I think that is around like free space. Like if there's no one in the theatre on a Monday, why not give it away for free? And access to, you know, industry professionals who they may not have access to, and like giving them opportunities to speak to industry professionals that's not like in a scary foyer sort of situation, like masterclasses, those sorts of things. Yeah. I think Shopfront's a really unique place in Sydney.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having worked with Shopfront a number of times, it's always nice when you kind of walk into a theatre company and you can kind of feel its ethos. and the things that it's passionate about, and how much it puts its money where its mouth is. And I think that's definitely a feeling that I've had from working at Shopfront.
Yeah. And as you know as well, like everything created at Shopfront is from those young people. Like, absolutely. Artists don't drive it. Professional artists don't. They're there to sort of to sort of tie everything together. But everything is generated from those young people. Yeah,
it's often quite like a mentoring role.
Yeah.
Kind of like, here's some tools potentially that might help drive this practice. In your time there, is there anything particular? Well, I was going to ask if there's something that you're particularly excited by or proud of, but actually I did also really want to ask you about Harness Ensemble, and about the work that you do with them, and the work that Harness Ensemble creates, and that kind of ethos there as well.
Yeah, and I think that's actually something I am most proud about in a way, is that Shopfront in the past had an accessibility stream. And a few years ago, it's when I say few, what year are we in? Who really knows? A little bit ago, we abolished the accessibility stream and made all of our programs inclusive and accessible. So any young person or emerging artist, regardless of ability or social circumstance or cultural background or identity or gender, can participate in our workshops. So the Harness Ensemble, I guess, was the first emerging artist thing there that we had, which was originally an ensemble made up of artists who had turned 18 and had aged up out of the younger programs, and they were artists with disability. And then through a collaboration with ATYP, did a big call out for just emerging artists who just wanted to make work. And so from that, the Harness Ensemble became a mixed abilities ensemble. And what I love about the Harness Ensemble is that we don't make work about disability. It's just the people who are on the stage may happen to have disability. And I think there's something political just in that, in having different bodies and different walks of life on stage, sharing their own stories, but may have nothing to do with their background at all. Yeah, so the Harness Ensemble is, emerging artists age 18 plus, and we've made 2 works, I think.
I'm going to say yes.
Yes. And we're currently, this year, they're doing sort of masterclasses with some amazing artists. You were one of them.
Yeah, that was fun. I always enjoy working with any kind of group of young artists.
Yeah, they're great, and they're just sort of soaking everything up like a big sponge, and then we'll do a creative development later in the year.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something really, I find really interesting as well, because of that thing of like, what kind of counts as political? Like, you put someone who looks like me on a stage, and it doesn't matter if I'm doing Chekhov, you'll be like, that's saying something. Is that something that you find is exciting, or something that is, I guess, constricting in like what it feels like you can do with that on stage?
Well, I think it's pretty ridiculous that is political, but it is. Yeah, and absolutely. Even with Post, like very early on, we realized that just having 3 females on stage talking about, like, having quite sort of mundane conversations was political in itself. And regardless what we did, because we were 3 women on stage, that we were going to be read in a particular way. I think there's something exciting you can do with it, but I think it's pretty ridiculous that we're at that place that seeing people of different colour and different ability on stage is political.
Yeah, it's funny that it's a statement. Like, actually, sometimes these people just exist in life.
Completely. Yeah. But that is kind of what excites me so much about a lot of the work I make. At Shopfront or with different communities or organisations, is just putting normal people on stage. Like, what?
Absolutely. Well, I was going to ask you about that, because you direct a lot of work with children and young people, non-actors, people with disabilities. And it's largely, I mean, all of it is work that's devised rather than something that starts with a script. So how do you approach that process? Is that different to kind of how you might, because your practice a lot is about working with people who are not professional actors or whatever. How do you approach that? And I guess, is that different to how you would in other circumstances?
Well, I think that's all I've ever done, so I don't know how I'd approach it in a different.
Yeah, I was like, that was a very convoluted way to ask the question that we were just talking about.
Just people on stage, but I think it's work that I've made with young people or community members or emerging artists that are not trained actors. Just giving them the opportunity to share their voice and empower them that their stories matter just as much as some Chekhov play that's been going on and on and on, I think is the beginning of any process. And just giving people the confidence that their story matters. And maybe that's the story that some audiences just want to see, that they don't want to see the same play over and over and over and over. And they want to hear some new voices on stage. And I think once people start realizing that and finding their confidence and their sort of that they're empowered to share their own voice, then I think the process is quite easy, actually. When I say easy, I don't, there's still that tunnel and all of that. But
oh yeah, absolutely.
But like easy to go, oh, wow, what an interesting story, or how this person connects with that story, even though they may be from two different walks of life. I also really love watching untrained people on stages. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe also because I like people watching and that sort of thing. I don't know.
I think it's something really nice that kind of comes out of that. It's not asking if something is professional or, not professional, amateur or whatever, isn't even the right question. It's not even close. It's actually, what are the stories that we're telling and how are we kind of engaging with them?
Yeah. And I think with Oedipus Schmoedipus, I mean, that really fueled my sort of bringing together my individual practice with post. Was of having 25 untrained volunteers on a stage to speak these words of the greats, of these great white men, but having zero training and questioning who is allowed to say those words on stage. Why do trained people have more? Why are they allowed to say it more than somebody who's not trained, who just came, off the street and then walked into Belvoir and now is saying these words?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really interesting thing, and it kind of goes to the heart of what you were saying about things like access. We don't have as many opportunities for people to make work that where you can fail or you can try things or test things or bring other voices or experiences into a room. I think when it has that, when you can't fail, things become a little bit risk averse and you can't do those things or try those things.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I want to ask you about Tiny Universes, which I watched earlier this year at PACT. What was the process of that? What was it like working with Milk Crate and kind of with the ensemble of artists that you had? And, was that similar to the process that you'd used with Shopfront, and kind of how did that come about?
Yes, it was such a beautiful organic experience. And again, what made it so easy was collaboration and collaborating, like that the people in the room really created something that was bigger than us all. And I've worked with Margot Politis, who's Milk Crate Theatre's artistic director. I've worked with Margot before, and we both share a very similar working methodology, and we both make art for the exact same reason, that we want to share these different stories on stage. And so from the very beginning, at least, we knew exactly, like we had that common goal, and so much trust between the two of us that just made it so easy to begin. And then working with Shopfront ensemble members and Milk Crate ensemble members was just like so beautiful of like the different ages and the different experiences. And I think if it had have been a different group in a room, or even some different people, it would have been a completely, the experience would not have been the same. And it was a process of, again, empowering people to share their voices and starting with this kernel of an idea of who we are with our public persona versus who we actually are sort of in our tiny universe, which currently now we're all in our tiny universes, aren't we?
And very small.
very, very small, and feel smaller by the day. And so thinking about those two things and then trying to find, I think what I really love about devising as well, I mean, there's so many things I love, but is when you find those sort of universal themes that just run throughout each story, regardless of their background and lived experience. And it was just like a big heart for Tiny Universe. It was really, really lovely.
Beautiful. It was a beautiful production to watch as well. For those who might not know, Milk Crate Theatre works with people who have experienced or are experiencing homelessness, and have, a track record of just making pretty extraordinary work, actually. So that was a very exciting thing to kind of see it at the beginning of 2021 or early on in 2021 before everything kind of shut down and closed. I think with Shopfront, something that I find really interesting is kind of how young the artists are as well, and kind of how broad their interests are. Like, I think there are lots of kind of incredible theatre companies that are around that I've worked with, but Shopfront kind of, I've seen people making films and, doing all kinds of arts things, and that space is also used by various members of the community. What is, I guess, Shopfront's role with young people, and especially young people around that area, around kind of, for people who don't know, it's based in Carlton, and which is kind of close to like Hurstville and Kogarah and so on. And that's not usually a part of Sydney that you'd think about as like, a hub for arts. So what, I guess, is the impact of its location and also having really young people come in and follow quite kind of different, not always theatrical paths?
Yeah, it's really like a place of like, you can just do whatever you want, like within, obviously, within certain restrictions, like not.
But it's quite broad restrictions, really.
Yeah, it's pretty broad. But Daniel, our CEO, always says that we're located like, it's sort of a commuter belt. Like people go from south to the city, and then the St. George sort of area is just this kind of no man's land, I guess. But it's actually not that far from the city. Like people think, well, Carlton, or always think, sometimes we'll get some people who try to come to a show and think we're in Carlton in Melbourne.
Oh dear.
Which happens sometimes, or like applications for a program or workshops or something. But we're not, we're in Sydney. And we're only 15 minutes from the city actually on a train. So it's not far at all. And the young people, though, that come to Shopfront actually come from all over Sydney. And I think what draws them there is exactly what you said, that you can kind of, it's not just a theatre. Like, yes, there's a lovely, beautiful theatre space and you can perform, but you can also do many other things. And we're very open and responsive to the young people giving feedback and ideas of what they want to do. So as you said, there's like film, there's drama, there's one year a young person came to us and said, I don't really want to be on the stage. I want to learn the stuff behind the scenes. So now like we have a technical theatre program where the young people get to work on shows and do lighting and sound design and all of the set design, costume, and all of these other amazing things. Just understanding that I suppose not one thing fits for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to do it, as I said earlier, because you love it. Like it's not,
not wildly lucrative.
No, it's not.
We have a question from the audience. It's about your work with Post. So what's your favorite work you've made with Post? And is Post working on anything new at the moment that you could tell us about?
My favorite work with Post, I think it's probably Ich Nibber Dibber. actually,
Mm.
because that was, I mean, we make work by improvising and recording ourselves on my mini DV camera. And then once we realized we'd been working together for 10 years and I was like looking under my bed one day, I found all the mini DV tapes. Thought like, does the camera even work anymore? And we put them in and then we went to Bundanon for a residency for 2 weeks and watched all of these videos and then realized we'd accidentally like created an archive of us growing up over 10 years.
Amazing.
And it was horrifying at points to see like what you wore, what you said, where are those pants anymore? Like what happened to those pants? Like all of these things, watching it. And then just like the things we spoke about, like so much poo, so much about bowel movements, like was considered. And because we met when we were in our early 20s, I think Zoe was 18 actually. And to think like 10 years, that's a huge growth. They were in the room when I gave birth. We recorded that. Like, so to go through this and then create a script that is a conversation that spans over a decade but takes place in 70 minutes was kind of, it felt like every show just felt like we were just chatting.
Yeah, amazing. And
there'd even be points in the show where I think like, oh, did we do that bit before? Because I'm just actually like, the script is my words. So now I'm at this part, but we even do the other part? I don't even know how long this show's gone for. Like, it's just so much fun to perform and so much fun to do and make.
There's something incredible about that, to have this, this really, I guess, fruitful kind of productive relationship over such a long period of time. And then to not just grow as artists, but to grow as people and actually have the opportunity to look back at it. It's like, none of us who have been working for more than, a little while are making the same kinds of things we were before. We grow so much. It's kind of amazing that you have this archive under your bed.
It's wild. And like, obviously each tape would be slightly influenced by the show we were meant to be making at that time of recording, but we just like go off track and then suddenly like, it's just us chatting. Yeah, it was beautiful. Are we doing anything now? Yes, we are. We received funding, so we're in a tunnel.
The funding tunnel.
Yeah. And we're trying to think about what Ich Nibber Dibber would look like if it was a series, a screen series. And what does that look like and how would those conversations take place on the screen?
Yeah, amazing.
That's what we're doing at the moment. But again, each time we meet, even though we're meant to be talking about that, it just ends up us talking, which is maybe doing our job.
And it's kind of amazing. Like, I think it's the thing that you were saying, like when you first started, it was so revolutionary kind of to see 3 women talking about things on stage without any men around them and not talking about men. I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth with that last bit. But even that, like on screen, to be doing that now, 10 years on, or a little bit longer now, 3 women to be talking about this stuff kind of feels revolutionary as well.
Well, he's hoping.
Fingers crossed. Screen is such a weird beast. I was like, theatre, I get that fundamentally, but yeah, it is. I think it's just nice to kind of have some of those relationships to kind of grow with you, because I think I still make work with people who I met at like Canberra Youth Theatre when I still lived in Canberra, where we had terrible pants. I don't know where some of those have gone, and it's probably just as well.
There's also some that you're like, I really like those pants, and where did they go? Where actually, yeah.
It is one of those funny things of like, I think I guess the thing that I find really exciting about making work kind of early on is kind of building your own ensemble and finding your own people. I think that's kind of, I guess, what people get out of going to drama school as well, or working with youth theatres, kind of get to build that ensemble of collaborators and people who know you as an artist, but also know you as a person. It's kind of enviable that you get to do that with something as cool as Post.
It is. And from the very beginning, we said like our friendship was more important than post.
Yeah.
So like I think we always need at least like 6 months apart a year. Otherwise we wouldn't still be doing it.
That sounds healthy.
It's very healthy. And yeah, I remember this because we all are so different. A very early memory of making a show was that we had a fight because one of us wanted to warm up. Our idea of warming up was in the space, like doing some voice and movement stuff. The other person's idea of warming up was going to the pub. And I didn't know where I sat in that. So one went to the pub and one stayed in the rehearsal room at Pact. And I just sat on the street between the two. I didn't want to make a decision. I was like, you're both my friends. Like, it's not even an artistic choice right now. This is a friendship choice and I'm not picking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's really good to work out as well, really young, you know, what your boundaries are and where you kind of sit. And the fact that always friendship is more important than theatre.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, sometimes you do forget that. Well, I mean, it doesn't mean there's not points where you're like, just want to kill that
absolutely.
person. Yeah. But I think it is, you need to like your collaborators. Because I think once you get a really good collaboration, that's when you're like you just nailed it. Like, I don't know how this happened.
It's kind of like a chemistry thing of like people who you know are going to be your friends. I kind of joke that all of my really good kind of collaborative relationships in the theatre were like arranged marriages. Other people were like, your energy and your energy is good. I'm going to set you two up to make work together.
It's an amazing way to think of it.
It's great. Say no to arranged marriages that are marriages, but say yes to all creative arranged marriages.
Yeah. Even though that person may just be going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and you happen to.
And yet it works out so well. We have another question from the audience. Nat, could you talk a little bit about how you navigate working at Shopfront, which is, you know, a more than full-time role, considering the fact that, you know, I know you take phone calls from artists at 10:30, having made those calls.
I love it.
10:30 p.m. And having your own artistic practice and also being a parent.
That's why I look like this.
Delightful and luminous.
I'm aging by the second, as we all are though. I think, again, it's because I love what I do. And it also just fuels me, like it energizes me, which is strange. I guess I'm sure people out there get what I'm saying. But yeah, so yes, Shopfront is full-time and it's more than full-time. So is parenthood. It's full-time, but also more than full-time. And one thing that's great is Shopfront is so supportive. The board, all of the staff are so supportive of, like, we employ artists. And I think that's so important to have an artistic practice outside of that, as is with post. For me to have an individual artistic practice outside of post is also as valuable, and they all feed into each other and they all make me a better artist and a better person, I would say, down the track. So Shopfront's so supportive in like allowing me to take time off to do those things. I think though, like, a career in the arts is not easy, regardless if you have one full-time job or, you know, like multiple projects going on at the same time. Like, it's hard work, which is why you have to love it. And it is a juggle. And being a parent, I mean, Shopfront's great for being a parent. This, like, Mabel was 2 when I emailed the then artistic director, Caitlin Newton-Broad, and was like, do you have any workshops I can teach? So I was teaching Zumba class. I was like, what can I do and bring my child along? So then I trained to be a Zumba instructor.
That is amazing. I had no idea.
Oh yeah, I was well into Zumba. And so, like, then I could bring her along to Zumba classes and then mix that up with drama workshops, and then she could come along. Like, yeah, a youth arts company is pretty good to be a parent. And now she does many workshops there while I'm there.
Perfect babysitting as well.
Perfect babysitting as well. Yeah. So I'd say plan that. If you're going to have a child, then try and get a job in a youth arts company. No, it's super challenging. It's super hard. But yeah, I genuinely think it's just because I love it that I do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that kind of like helps with that as well? Are there like things where you're like, oh, I'm not going to take this home or whatever? I mean, I don't know any artists who are good at separating home and work life at all.
No, I think my husband would say a few things I could leave other places and not bring home. I'm sure there's heaps of them. I mean, I don't bring home set stuff anymore. I don't bring home things to store at the house.
Oh, that's good.
It's a physical thing, but it's something.
Sets are so big and it happens. Yeah, I have bits
happen.
of sets stored in people's garages and stuff.
Yeah. I don't do that anymore. But I don't. It's good to have a holiday booked. That's really good.
Yeah, a holiday that isn't a research trip as well, which is something that I'm having to learn.
I think it's also so tricky for any artist, actually, because you don't know if you'll get the next thing. So I think you just constantly like, yes, I'll do it. Yes. And you just keep doing it because you don't really know what the next year's going to look like, because it is such a roller coaster.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think probably as a sector, we need to get better at thinking about how, like that working well and beyond the hours of the day does not make you a better artist.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
Do separate those things. I think as a sector, we need to get better at that. But I think it's such a, you just don't know what's going to happen next, that you do just do it all.
But then, yeah, like you're saying, you have to find time to book in that holiday or,
Completely.
find time off. And I think that's useful for people like across the board, people with children or people with disabilities. Like that was, I think it's something that I think our industry is kind of very slowly responding to in working with people who have different abilities, who have different access requirements. That's something that, I think Shopfront does so well.
I even remember with posts like very early on, when, my daughter would have only been 2, I think, when we started making Oedipus Schmoedipus, was 2 years old. But for us to somehow navigate what does that mean now, with me being a mother, was super tricky, because I don't think we had anybody who had shown us that way. We had no other artists to look at and go, oh, that's what it looks like. But Zoe and Mish was so wanted me to stay a part of it and didn't want me to just sort of disappear into the ethos of motherhood land and that's it. But to think like, oh, I could put childcare in on a funding application. Maybe we could just work from 11 till 3. Like, we're probably only productive for 4 hours anyway. So like, why are we here for 8 hours? Like those sorts of things, and knowing just what you need and that you can ask for that. Took us a really long time to figure that out. And as you're saying, that is in regards to mental health or disability or anything else, because I'm definitely not saying motherhood is a disability, but like
it has requirements, access needs.
It has access needs, but it's okay for you to ask for those things you need in order to work.
Absolutely. I mean, even just on Eat Me, the project that I worked on at NIDA, one of the co-directors had a 2-month-old baby, and it was actually really nice having a baby in the rehearsal room. And this is stuff that I imagine 5 or 6 years ago would have been quite difficult.
Yeah.
So it's exciting that these kinds of changes are happening. Is there anything that you, I guess, are excited about in terms of what the future holds for our sector, and also, I guess, for these people who work with whose stories we don't get to hear as much? They're not trained actors, but they're people with things to share and things to say. Is there anything that you find particularly exciting or heartening?
Well, I think that that what you were saying before of it's not a question of professional and amateur. And what even are those two things, really?
Totally.
But
if it's about training, then I never trained legitimately. So yeah.
Completely. so to see more of those stories on stages and that audiences relate to those stories, you know, we don't necessarily just want to make work for theatre goers. Like, they're already converted, they're there. But how do you get those other people there? So to kind of broaden it up for the people on the stage, but also the people off the stage, those audiences, I think is exciting. I think people are starting to want to see work that is outside of the kind of traditional main stage, which excites me.
Absolutely. And it is one of those things, you know, I don't think you can look at kind of the work that, you know, you've made in your various, with your various hats on, as something that is just for, you know, theatre goers. Like, it's, theatre so often has the accusation leveled at it that it's for particular people or it's alienating. And so it's so exciting to come across a body of work and practice that isn't about that at all. Yeah.
It shouldn't, I mean, people should get to sort of learn and experience and see themselves on stages from art. It shouldn't be this elite world where you feel scared to go in a foyer or you can't see yourself represented. It should mirror back what society is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, yeah. Do you know what? We actually didn't run over time, Nat. Look at us go. We're both so chatty. Thank you so much, Nat, for joining us. I think that's a really lovely place for us to wrap up.
Thank you for having me. It's always lovely to speak to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in for our In Conversation with Natalie Rose. Thanks, Nat.
Thanks.